The Phoenix sun beat down mercilessly at 109 degrees, turning the asphalt into a shimmering lake of heat that made the air dance and blur. Emma Rodriguez sat on the cracked sidewalk of Camelback Road, her back pressed against the rough brick wall of a closed gas station. Her sundress, once yellow like sunshine, was now stained with sweat and dust. Her knees were scraped raw from stumbling on the broken pavement hours earlier. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the terror that gripped her heart in her arms. 4-year-old Lily lay frighteningly still. The little girl's face was flushed crimson, her breathing rapid and shallow. Her dark curls were matted with perspiration, and her small lips had begun to crack from dehydration. Emma had been rationing the last few sips of warm water from a plastic bottle for the past 2 hours, dabbing drops on her daughter's tongue with trembling fingers. "Baby, please wake up," Emma whispered, her voice hoarse and breaking. "Mama's here, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." But even as she spoke the words, she knew they might be lies. Nothing had been okay for a very long time. Cars rushed past in an endless stream, their drivers sealed away in air-conditioned comfort, oblivious to the desperate woman and child wilting on the sidewalk. Emma had tried waving at a few vehicles earlier, but people either didn't see her or chose not. She understood why. She looked like trouble, like someone who might ask for money or bring problems into their carefully ordered lives. The events of the morning played on repeat, in her mind like a cruel movie she couldn't turn off. Standing at the iron gates of the Castellanos estate, the home where she'd lived for 5 years as Roberto's wife, she had begged his sister Carmen for mercy. "Please, just let me get some of Lily's medicine," Emma had pleaded, her daughter burning. "With fever in her arms? She's sick. I'll leave right after, I promise." Carmen's eyes had been cold as winter stone. "You killed my brother," she had said simply. "You and your bad luck, your weakness. He was trying to come home to fix things with you when he crashed. Now he's dead, and you're nothing to this family." Emma had tried to explain that Roberto had been drinking, that he'd been angry because she'd refused to come to his business dinner, staying home instead with their sick daughter. But Carmen had already turned away, nodding to the security guard who began closing the gates. "Wait!" Emma had screamed, running forward. "At least let me get her inhaler. She has asthma." The metal gates had clanged shut with a finality that echoed in her chest. Through the bars, she could see the house where Lily had taken her first steps, where Emma had once felt safe. Now it was a fortress keeping them out in the desert heat. With nowhere else to go, Emma had started walking. She'd called her parents in New Mexico. But her father had been brutally clear. "You made your bed when you married into that family. We told you he was trouble, but you wouldn't listen. Don't come crying to us now." The dial tone had been the loneliest sound in the world. Now, as the sun reached its merciless peak, Emma felt her own strength beginning to fail. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision, and her mouth felt like it was full of sand. Lily hadn't moved or spoken in over an hour. Emma pressed her ear to her daughter's chest, relief flooding through her when she heard the small, rapid heartbeat still fighting. "God," she whispered, her voice lost in the roar of traffic. "If you're listening, please send help. I don't care what happens to me, but please save my baby." As if in answer to her prayer, she heard the sound of an engine slowing, then stopping. A truck door slammed and footsteps approached on the scorching pavement. Emma didn't look up. She'd been disappointed too many times already, ma'am. The voice was deep, gentle, tinged with concern. "Are you okay?" Emma slowly raised her head. Squinting against the brutal sunlight, a tall man stood before her, his shadow providing blessed relief from the sun's glare. He was perhaps in his mid-30s, with kind brown eyes and work-worn hands. His clothes were simple but clean, a button-down shirt and jeans that spoke of honest work rather than boardroom meetings. "The little girl," he said, crouching down to their level. "She's burning up. How long have you been out here?" Emma's throat worked, but no sound came out. She tried again, managing only a whisper. "Since morning, she's sick. I don't have anywhere to go." The man's expression shifted from concern to something deeper, more determined. "I'm David," he said. "I'm going to help you, but I need you to trust me. My truck has air conditioning. And I know a doctor who won't ask questions. Can you stand?" Emma stared at him, her mind struggling to process that someone had actually stopped, actually cared. I don't have money," she managed to say. "I'm not asking for money," David replied, his voice steady and sure. "I'm asking if you'll let me help your daughter," something in his tone, in the way he looked at Lily with genuine concern rather than judgment, made Emma nod. David gently helped her to her feet, supporting her elbow as she swayed from heat exhaustion. He opened the passenger door of his truck and guided them inside, the blast of cold air hitting them like a physical embrace. As David pulled into traffic, Emma closed her eyes and held her daughter close. For the first time in hours, Lily's breathing seemed to ease slightly in the cool air. Emma didn't know who this stranger was, or why he'd stopped when everyone else had driven past. She only knew that in her darkest moment, when hope had nearly died, someone had chosen to see her suffering and act. The truck hummed quietly down the highway, carrying them toward an uncertain future that, for the first time in months, held the possibility of kindness. The suburban house that David pulled into was modest but welcoming. With a red-tiled roof and a small garden where roses bloomed despite the desert heat, Emma sat in the passenger seat, still clutching Lily, afraid to move or speak. The little girl had stirred slightly during the 20-minute drive, whimpering softly as the cool air revived her, but she remained frighteningly lethargic. "The doctor's already here," David said quietly, nodding toward a silver sedan in the driveway. "Martinez. She's a friend of mine, and she's good with kids." Emma's arms tightened around her daughter. "I can't pay her." "Nobody's asking you to," David replied, his voice patient. "Let's just focus on getting Lily better." Inside the house, the air was blessedly cool and smelled faintly of coffee and something Emma couldn't identify. Something that spoke of home and safety. A woman in her 50s, with gentle eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, approached them immediately. "I'm Dr. Martinez," she said, extending her hands toward Lily. "May I?" Emma hesitated for just a moment before allowing the doctor to take her daughter. Dr. Martinez's touch was sure and gentle as she examined the little girl, checking her temperature, listening to her breathing, looking into her eyes with a small flashlight. "Severe dehydration and heat exhaustion," she diagnosed after a few minutes. "Her temperature is dangerously high, but she's going to be okay. We need to get fluids into her slowly and bring her temperature down gradually." The next hour passed in a blur of careful ministrations. Dr. Martinez had brought 4 supplies and set up a small pediatric drip to rehydrate. Emma watched every move with hawk-like intensity, her hands shaking as she smoothed her daughter's hair back from her fevered forehead.
"You did good, Mama,"
Dr. Martinez said softly as Lily's breathing became more regular. It kept her alive in impossible conditions. That takes strength. Emma's eyes filled with tears at the kindness in the doctor's voice. She'd been called weak, selfish, and cursed so many times in the past months that she'd almost forgotten what compassion sounded like. As Dr. Martinez packed up her supplies, she pulled David aside. Emma couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw the serious expressions on both their faces. When the doctor left, David returned to the living room, where Emma sat beside the couch where Lily was sleeping. "She'll be fine," he said, settling into a chair across from them. "Kids bounce back fast. But she needs rest, and you both need to stay cool and hydrated for the next few days." Emma nodded, then looked around the comfortable living room with its worn leather furniture and bookshelves lined with architectural journals. "I should go. I've imposed enough. Go where?" David asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Emma opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She had no answer. No money, no car, no home, no family willing to take them in. The reality of their situation crashed over her like a wave, and she buried her face in her hands. "You can stay here," David said, "at least until you figure things out." "You don't know me," Emma whispered through her fingers. "You don't know what I've done, what people say about me." "I know you carried a sick child through hell to try to save her," David replied. "That's enough." Over the next week, Emma began to understand that David's kindness wasn't an act or a temporary gesture. He left for work each morning, returning in the evening with groceries and quiet patience. He'd set up the guest room with clean sheets and towels, leaving children's books on the nightstand that he'd picked up at a used bookstore. He never asked probing questions or made Emma feel like she owed him explanations. Lily recovered quickly. As Dr. Martinez had predicted, soon she was exploring the house with the boundless curiosity of a healthy 4-year-old. Chattering about the fish in David's small aquarium and the way the ceiling fan made shadows dance on the walls, Emma watched her daughters return to life, with a mixture of relief and heartbreak. This was how Lily should always be, carefree and safe. It was during the second week that Margaret Chen arrived unannounced. David's mother was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She knocked once and walked in, carrying a covered dish that smelled of ginger and star anise. "So you're the woman my son has been harboring," Margaret said, her voice neutral but her gaze assessing. Emma felt her face burn with shame. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen. I know this looks bad. I'll leave tonight." "Sit down," Margaret commanded, not unkindly. "David's told me nothing except that you and your daughter needed help. I'm here to see for myself what kind of help you need." Over the next hour, Margaret observed everything. She watched Emma gently correct Lily's table manners without raising her voice. She noticed how Emma automatically cleaned up after herself, how she'd organized the medicine cabinet and folded the towels in neat stacks. She saw the way Emma flinched when a car backfired outside, and how she instinctively moved to shield Lily from any perceived threat. "You're afraid," Margaret said finally, when Lily had gone to play in the garden. Emma's hands stilled on the dish towel she was folding. "I'm sorry. You move like someone who's been hit before. You apologize for taking up space. You eat like you're not sure the food will still be there tomorrow." Margaret's voice was matter-of-fact, not accusatory. "My late husband was a cruel man. I recognize the signs." Emma's throat tightened. "I don't want to burden David with my problems." "What problems?" Margaret asked. "A dead husband who drank too much? In-laws who blame you for his choices? A child who needs stability?" She shook her head. "Those aren't problems. Those are circumstances. Problem would be if you let them define the rest of your life." That evening, as they sat on the back porch watching Lily chase fireflies in the garden, Emma found herself telling David about Roberto, about the man who had been charming and attentive during their courtship, who had gradually become controlling and violent after their wedding, about the isolated life she'd led, cut off from friends and family, walking on eggshells to avoid his explosive temper. "He died driving drunk," she said, her voice flat. "Coming home from a business dinner, I'd refused to attend because Lily was sick. His family blamed me, said I was a curse that killed their golden boy. Maybe they're right." David was quiet for a long moment, watching his mother teach Lily to catch fireflies in a mason jar. "My father was an angry man too," he said finally. "Drank too much. Hit too hard. My mother stayed for 20 years, thinking she could fix him, or that it was her fault somehow. When he finally died, she said the strangest thing. She said she felt guilty for feeling relieved." Emma looked at him in surprise. "What did you tell her?" That relief was probably the first honest emotion she'd allowed herself to feel in decades. He turned to meet her eyes. "Surviving doesn't make you guilty, Emma. It makes you strong." 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. Emma recognized the law firm's letterhead immediately, her hands shaking as she tore open the envelope. The words swam before her eyes: custody petition, unfit mother, endangerment of a minor child. Carmen Castellanos was trying to take Lily away. Emma sank into a kitchen chair, with the letter falling from her numb fingers. David found her there an hour later, staring at nothing, tears streaming down her face. "They want to take her," she whispered. "They say I'm unfit, that I endangered her by being homeless. They have lawyers and money and judges who golf with their friends. What do I have?" David picked up the letter, reading it with a frown. "You have the truth," he said. "And you have people who will stand up for you." "What people?" Emma laughed. Bitterly, "I have no one." "You have me," David said simply, "and my mother. And Dr. Martinez, who will testify that you saved Lily's life by keeping her alive until help came. You have neighbors who've seen you reading to her every night, teaching her to garden, making sure she brushes her teeth and says her prayers. Emma stared at him. Why would you do that? Why would you put yourself in the middle of this? David was quiet for a moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. Because 3 weeks ago, I was a man who came home to an empty house every night and convinced himself that being alone was the same as being safe. Then I saw you on that sidewalk, and I remembered that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just not drive past. That night, Emma stood in Lily's doorway, watching her daughter sleep peacefully under the butterfly print comforter. David had bought her. The little girl clutched a stuffed rabbit that Margaret had brought. Her face relaxed and trusting in sleep. Emma had spent months believing she was nothing but bad luck, a curse that destroyed everything she touched. But looking at her daughter now, healthy and safe and loved, she began to wonder if maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe survival itself was a kind of victory. Maybe choosing to keep fighting, keep hoping, keep loving despite everything was its own form of strength. The custody battle would be brutal, but for the first time in her life, Emma wouldn't face it alone. The courthouse in downtown Phoenix was a fortress of glass and steel that reflected the harsh morning sun like armor. Emma sat in the passenger seat of David's truck, her hands folded tightly in her lap, watching lawyers in expensive suits stride through the revolving doors with briefcases that probably cost more than she'd ever owned. They look confident, she murmured, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. David turned off the engine and studied her profile. Over the past month, Emma had gained weight, her hollow cheeks filling out with regular meals. In the absence of constant stress, her hair, once brittle and dull, now shone with health. But this morning, she looked fragile again, as if the courthouse's imposing presence had reminded her of all the ways the world could break her. Confidence isn't the same as being right, he said quietly. Remember that. Margaret Chen sat in the back seat, dressed in her best navy suit, her silver hair perfectly styled. She'd insisted on coming, despite Emma's protests that she didn't want to involve her further. That child belongs with her mother, Margaret had said with finality. Anyone with eyes can see that. Inside the courthouse, the corridors echoed with the sound of clicking heels and hushed conversations. Emma's lawyer, Patricia Morales, met them at the elevators. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who specialized in family law and had a reputation for fighting fiercely for her clients. The Castellanos family has brought their full legal team, Patricia said, as they rode up to the third floor. 3 lawyers, a private investigator, and what looks like half the social elite of Phoenix. They're trying to intimidate you. Stomach churned. Is it working? Patricia smiled grimly. Only if you let it. Remember what we discussed. You're not the same woman who was living on the streets a month ago. You have stability now, support a home. That's what matters. The courtroom was smaller than Emma had expected, with wooden benches that reminded her uncomfortably of church pews. The Castellanos family sat on the left side, Carmen in an elegant black dress that probably cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe. Her lawyers were arranged around her like a protective wall, their expressions coldly professional. On the right side, Emma sat between David and Margaret, with Patricia at the table in front of them. Dr. Martinez had arrived early and sat in the second row, along with 2 of David's neighbors who had volunteered to testify about Emma's character. Judge Harrison was a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. She'd been on the bench for over 20 years and had seen every kind of family crisis imaginable. As she reviewed the case files, Emma found herself studying the judge's face, searching for any hint of what she might be thinking. This is a custody hearing regarding the minor child Lily Rodriguez. Judge Harrison began, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. The petitioner, Carmen Castellanos, seeks custody based on allegations of neglect and endangerment. The respondent, Emma Rodriguez, seeks to retain custody of her biological daughter. Carmen's lead attorney, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a voice like silk, stood to present their case. He painted a picture of Emma as an unstable woman who had exposed her child to danger, who had no fixed address, no steady income, no support system. He spoke of the hot afternoon when Emma and Lily had been found on the sidewalk, describing it as evidence of Emma's failure as a mother. "This child deserves stability," he concluded, his tone suggesting that Emma was inherently incapable of providing it. "She deserves a home with family members who have the resources and judgment to keep her safe." Emma felt each word like a physical blow. When she glanced at the judge, she couldn't read her expression. Panic began to rise in her chest. The familiar feeling of being trapped with no way out. Then Patricia stood up. Her presence was like a shield between Emma and the accusations. "Your Honor," Patricia began, her voice calm and measured. "The petitioner would have you believe that a mother's love and determination in the face of crisis is somehow evidence of unfitness. But the evidence tells a different story entirely." She called Dr. Martinez to the stand first. The doctor testified about the condition she'd found Lily in that day, explaining how Emma's quick thinking and careful rationing of water had likely saved her daughter's life. "In my 30 years of practice," Dr. Martinez said, looking directly at the judge, "I've seen many cases of child neglect. This was not one of them. This was a mother doing everything humanly possible to protect her child under impossible circumstances." Margaret Chen was the next witness. Emma had been surprised when her lawyer suggested calling David's mother, but Margaret had been adamant. On the stand, she spoke with quiet authority about what she'd observed in the weeks Emma and Lily had been staying with them. "I've raised children," Margaret said simply. "I know what good parenting looks like." Emma Rodriguez reads to her daughter every night, teaches her manners without harshness, makes sure she eats her vegetables, and brushes her teeth. She's patient when the child is cranky, firm when she needs to be, and loving always. That little girl adores her mother, and more importantly, she feels safe with her. The Castellanos' attorney tried to shake Margaret's testimony, asking pointed questions about Emma's lack of employment and her dependence on David's charity. Margaret's response was sharp and immediate. "Charity?" she repeated, her voice rising. "Slightly, sir. Emma Rodriguez earns her keep. She maintains the household, tends the garden, and helps care for my son's elderly neighbor. She's not a charity case. She's a woman rebuilding her life with dignity and determination." David was called to testify about the circumstances of how he'd found Emma and Lily. His testimony was straightforward and factual. But when Carmen's attorney asked him about his motivations for helping strangers, David's answer was unexpected. "I helped them because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "But they've given me far more than I've given them. Emma has brought life back to a house that was just a place to sleep. Lily has reminded me what it sounds like when a home is filled with laughter. I'm not doing them a favor by letting them stay. They're doing me one." The judge asked David about his long-term intentions, whether he expected Emma to remain dependent on his support indefinitely. David's response was measured but firm. "Emma is enrolled in a medical assistant program that starts next month. She's working toward independence, not running from it. But even if she weren't, even if she needed help for years, I'd be honored to provide it. That's what people do for each other when they care." Finally, Emma herself took the stand. Her voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger as she spoke about the years of her marriage, the isolation and fear that had defined her life with Roberto. She spoke about the night he died, about the months of grief and guilt that followed, about the morning the Castellanos family had thrown her out with nothing but the clothes on her back. "I made mistakes," she said, looking directly at Judge Harrison. "I stayed in a marriage that was hurting me and my daughter. I let fear make me small and silent. I never stopped fighting for Lily. When we had nothing, when we were sitting on that sidewalk with nowhere to go, I was still fighting. I will never stop fighting for her." Carmen's attorney pressed her about her future plans, about her ability to provide for Lily independently. Emma's answers were honest and direct. She spoke about her plans to complete her medical training, about the small apartment she'd already put a deposit on, about the job interview she had scheduled for the following week. "I'm not asking for charity," she said firmly. "I'm asking for the chance to rebuild our lives. Lily and I, we're a team. We've been through hell together, and we've survived. We're not broken. We're just getting stronger." The judge recessed for lunch, and Emma found herself unable to eat the sandwich David had bought her. She kept replaying the morning's testimony, analyzing every word, every expression on the judge's face. Carmen had looked confident throughout, whispering frequently with her lawyers, occasionally shooting Emma looks of barely concealed contempt. When court reconvened, Judge Harrison's expression was serious, but not unkind. She reviewed the evidence methodically, acknowledging the concerns raised by the petitioner about Emma's recent homelessness and lack of resources. However, she continued, and Emma felt her heart stop, the evidence also shows a mother who has consistently put her child's welfare above her own, who has taken steps to improve their circumstances, and who has the support of people who have observed her parenting firsthand. The judge looked directly at Emma. Ms. Rodriguez, the court recognizes that you have faced extraordinary challenges. The loss of your husband, the rejection by his family, it's a temporary homelessness. These are circumstances that would test any parent. But the evidence shows that throughout these trials, you have maintained your focus on your daughter's well-being. Emma's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together in her lap. The petition for custody is denied, Judge Harrison announced. Lily Rodriguez will remain in the custody of her mother, Emma Rodriguez, with the recommendation that social services provide appropriate support services to help ensure the family's continued stability. Emma heard the words, but they seemed to come from very far away. She felt David's hand on her shoulder, heard Margaret's quiet "thank God" from behind her. Across the aisle, Carmen's face was a mask of fury, her lawyers already gathering there, papers with tight expressions. Outside the courthouse, Emma stood on the steps blinking in the bright afternoon sun. Lily was waiting with Mrs. Patterson, David's neighbor who had volunteered to babysit during the hearing. The little girl ran to her mother, wrapping her arms around Emma's legs with the unconscious trust of a child who had never doubted that her mother would come back for her. "Did we win, Mama?" Lily asked, looking up with bright eyes. Emma knelt down to her daughter's level, cupping her face in her hands. "Yes, baby, we won." That evening, they celebrated with takeout pizza and ice cream on David's back porch. Lily fell asleep in Emma's lap as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Margaret had gone home, but not before kissing Emma's forehead and whispering, "Welcome to the family, dear." David sat beside them on the porch swing, his presence steady and comfortable. "So what now?" he asked quietly. Emma looked down at her sleeping daughter, then out at the garden, where mint and tomatoes grew in neat rows. "Now we build something new," she said. "Not perfect, not without problems, but ours." David nodded, understanding passing. Between them, without words, they weren't lovers, might never be, but they were something equally precious. They were family, chosen and fought for, and earned through the simple act of showing up for each other when it mattered most. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the quiet confidence that tomorrow would come and she would be ready for it. Not because her life was perfect, but because she was no longer facing it alone. The little girl in her arms stirred and murmured, "Mama, are we home?" Emma smiled, her heart full of a peace she'd never thought possible. "Yes, sweetheart, we're home."